Okay, let's get started with Business Book Club in Practice, Developing Atomic Sales Habits. Atomic Habits, probably, we read it in Business Book Club last year, and it was probably the most popular book we read all year. Fond memories for me because it was a reread, and I read it while working remotely in Bolivia. So just all good vibes around the book. Super excited to be joined tonight by Luigi Prestonenzi, who is somebody that I learn from every single time I speak to him. And I know feels the same way about developing strong habits, strong skill sets, and mindsets. So I know some folks are still logging on. We want to keep the chat active tonight, but I want to jump right in because I have a lot of questions that I know I want to ask you. So maybe first, Luigi, when did you read the book, and what did it mean to you the first time that you read it?
Yeah, I read it a couple of years back, but it didn't really hit me until I read it the second time, and I think we spoke about this. The first time I read it, I'm like, yeah, I know a lot of this stuff. I was a bit arrogant in my thinking when I was reading it, thinking, some of this stuff sounds quite basic. But again, when I read it the second time, I was reading it from a different perspective, and it just hit me. A lot of the concepts just hit me a lot deeper than the first time that I read the book.
Yeah, same. And I think it's funny that you say that maybe like the first time you read it, you were like, oh, well, obviously, because I think I had a bit of that too. And then the second time I read it, which was, probably 5 years later, because I read it when it first came out, I was like, oh, wow. Actually, so much of this is what I've been doing the last 5 years that has been instrumental to my success.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because it validates some of the things that we're doing, that I was doing well. That it highlighted, okay, there's the sign. This is the reason why I'm achieving a certain result, because I'm doing it this way, and that was great. But I was also reading it the second time because there were some habits that I wanted to break, right? And it's been a really great way, like something simple as I bought myself an alarm clock to go next to my bed so I could put my phone out of the room, right? I wanted to break that habit of being on my phone before I went to bed, because I'd find myself like, scrolling and then thinking about stuff and then having a bit of a disrupted sleep, or, waking up in the middle of the night and checking my phone. Why?
Yeah.
Right. So that was something, again, reading the book, I'm like, yes, I've taken it and put my phone out of the room, and it's been great. It actually, I found it's lowered anxiety levels, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, you took action and you did something that we anticipate will have a positive impact on our mental health, right? Removing that temptation, removing that distraction. The science is also pretty clear, particularly checking your phone first thing in the morning, that it's rewiring your brain to be biased towards the dopamine hits that social media give us. So part of the book is how can we remove bad habits? And I think James Clear gives examples of like replacing water with soda or removing snacks but removing your phone and removing that chance to immediately go to those dopamine hits makes a big difference. I mean, I didn't go that far, but I moved my social media into a mini folder just so the icons aren't there on the front page as easy to get to. And I know something we talked about last month when we were chatting was the fact that I have two phones, a personal phone and I have a work phone, so that I keep my work, like I have fewer choices to make. I have fewer times throughout the day that I have to exercise that willpower because I keep my LinkedIn and my work email and my Slack and a lot of my chats with work only colleagues on a separate phone, so that I don't have the temptation to be checking them at times when I should be present with friends or family.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think there's so many good takeaways, and I know we're going to break some of these down and how we can apply it in a sales perspective. But I think the other big takeaway for me was around the habit stacking. right?
Mm.
And building on good habits. Um, and the very last one, the real big one was when trying to form a new habit. Like instead of trying to do like an hour at the gym, this is just an example. Just do 5 minutes of something, and do 5 minutes every day, and just increase it over time, right? But don't try to go, because I hear this a lot, especially in sales. Oh, I need to start prospecting. I'm going to start prospecting 2 hours a day, and you're going from nothing to two, and then it doesn't
Yeah.
happen. Just start by doing 10 minutes or 5 minutes, right? So, and there's just some. I know it sounds quite basic and it sounds quite obvious, but um, I think sometimes we look for the magical, most complex solutions when sometimes the best way to find to achieve something different is just go back to a basic, simple concept.
So true. Going back to basics. Perfect segue to what I want to dive into to next, and it's around goal setting. I'd also love to hear from folks that have joined us what their favorite piece of the book was, or what that thing was that they took action on that has positively impacted their lives. So please head to the chat and let us know what this book has meant to you, what your favorite part is, what that habit is that's really a game changer to you. What I'd love to chat about, oops, I'm going the wrong direction in the slide deck. What I'd love to chat about is the difference between a system and a goal. This is something that James Clear really digs into. This is his quote: goals are the results you want to achieve. Systems are about the processes that lead to those results. I think talking about this in the context of atomic sales habits is so important because, well, a lot of salespeople are dreamers. So a lot of us have those big goals. We're also told to have moonshot goals and blue sky thinking and all of those, really cringy, cliche corporate phrases. But let's talk about quota. A quota is a goal. A quota
Yeah.
is a goal. And what we so often fail to do is understand the process we are going to embark on a daily, on a weekly, on
Yeah.
a monthly basis to hit those quarterly and annual quotas. So I can share my process I use for goal setting. It's called GROW. I'd love to hear how you hold yourself accountable to those big goals with those, more mini milestone systems.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think, again, for those that have read the book or those that haven't read the book, if you are going to jump into it, James references a thing called the habit tracker, right? And I love the concept of the habit tracker. And I think if we all think about from a sales perspective, we have a CRM and we go, well, CRM can be a bit mundane and stuff, but if we use it properly, we can use it to our advantage, right? So for me, I'm a big fan of focusing on the activities that I need to do every day,
Yeah.
right? And I've spoken about this before, especially in a sales context. I can't control the result, like especially in selling, right? I can't control how many people buy from me, but I can absolutely control the activity that I do every day that leads me to that outcome. And so that for me, that's where my system's designed around those activity metrics. What do I need to do each and every day? And what are the non-negotiables that I have to do in my job that if I skip, it's going to impact the result, right?
Yeah.
There are some basic things, yeah. Like we know we've got to be having new conversations. We've got to be progressing conversations as well in order for us to get closer to hitting our quota.
Yeah. I'm going to drop a link here with the grow goal setting so folks can go deeper into that on their own if they'd like to. But the piece of it that you just mentioned is that sort of mini milestone, what happens
Yeah.
on a daily basis and what are we accountable for? Because often in sales, an excuse I heard, and tell me if you've heard this as well, is like, oh, but my SDR didn't get me enough meetings, or like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, I set a goal that I was going to have 4 conversations and people didn't pick up. That's not my fault. Those are the wrong goals.
Yeah.
The goals that you want to set if you're a SDR frontline appointment setter are things like the number of emails that you're going to send a day, the number of phone calls that you're going to make a day, the number of folks you're going to prospect or folks you're going to add to a sequence, those things that are, if not 100% in your control, 98% in your control, because they become non-negotiables. You're either doing them or you're not doing them, but it's full accountability on you. So I think that's such a smart point. What are some things, Luigi, that folks should think about doing on a daily basis to achieve their long-term revenue goals?
Well, I think especially when it comes to selling, right? I think if you think about it, and I know that this topic gets spoken about a lot, but prospecting daily for me it should be a non-negotiable, right? And regardless whether you're prospecting half an hour, or 3 hours, it doesn't really matter. It just matters that if you're doing it every single day and you're establishing new conversations. And I think if you look at those high payoff activities, there are certain activities that we know we have to be spending our time on. Otherwise, it just doesn't progress. We just won't progress to the outcome that we're looking to achieve, right? So, and that's when you think about your personal operating system going, what are the things that I need to do first thing in the morning that I should be blocking out everything else and just focusing on the things that are important to me? And there's an incredible author called Mike Weinberg, and he referenced saying high-performing salespeople are selfish with their time, right? And I love that quote because it's saying, there's a portion of my day where I'm not going to allow you to invade my time, because if I become reactive to your need, then I'm going to suffer. Yeah. So I love the mornings. For me, my mornings are the most productive time of my day because I can get things done on my, key to-do list. And then I'm happy to go off and do other bits and pieces, right? So, and if I look back at my career in selling and why I was always able to achieve certain results, it's because I was very disciplined in maintaining that focus, especially when it came to prospecting and deal follow-up. Like that's something that I've always been relentlessly focused on. Yeah. So, and then outside of that, there are obviously other activities that we need to attend to.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant. And I would guess a lot of folks that are joining us tonight that are elite sellers as well would attribute a huge amount of their success to having processes, to having systems, to having consistency, right? How often do we talk about the thing that is going to lead to your success is consistency? And that's not just in sales. Like if you're an athlete, it's about consistency. If you're creating content, it's about consistently like showing up in a way that is predictable.
Yeah.
Makes a huge difference. And you are a lot easier to manage. Just from the perspective as a sales leader, like knowing that I can count on you to go do your things, just incredible.
And another thing that I loved about what James talks about, right? And he talks about that even when it's when you don't want to do the task, that's when you need to do it, right? And I love, because I've been really focused on my health and fitness, right? Because I dropped off for a while. And there are days where, especially running, like I don't want to get out there. I'm like, no, but they're the days that gives me credits in the bank. Yeah. When I get out there, I go, I work through, hustle through, whichever term you want to say, and I feel better at the end for it. And I think if we think about that from a prospecting perspective, there are days where you don't feel like doing it. Yeah. And they're the days where you just got to pick up the phone, you've got to send that email, and you've got to work through it because you'll get credits in the bank. And I also like the fact that it's okay to miss a day, right? That's actually okay. But then if you back it up and miss another day, then you start to justify why you're missing it. And before too long, you're letting old, bad habits creep in that will impact performance. So that for me was another real aha moment from the book.
Oh, there's so much good stuff to get into. I'm gonna share this quote from the book because I think it speaks to exactly what you just said, that if it's like the easy choice, we need to really question if it's the right choice. Something that you said earlier was about not making our goal this huge, like sort of a goal that feels maybe overwhelming or feels a bit unachievable. Thinking about fitness, my goal is always just to put on my SoulCycle shoes.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, if I put on my shoes, I'm gonna get on the bike. I'm gonna clip onto the bike. But like, that's that first goal. Just get your shoes on, because it creates the momentum that carries us forward. In thinking about this quote, the more immediate pleasure you get from an action, the more strongly you should question whether it aligns to your long-term goals. I'd love to hear your take on folks that maybe aren't taking a multi-channel approach, and instead they're sticking with the channel that is their preferred channel, that is easiest for them, that they like the most, versus maybe where their clients are at. How do you feel like that plays into creating atomic habits?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? Because what is it? The law of least resistance, yeah, or least effort. We're comfortable doing things that it's in our comfort zone, and sometimes in order to push the boundaries, and you've got to push yourself outside of your comfort zones. And it's interesting because we've got like a lot of conferences are back on, yeah, and for a lot of us sellers that are extroverts, we love going to those conferences. But then there's a lot of people that are not extroverts that might struggle to go to those conferences, right? So it's not just about multi-channel or phone or email. It's about going to face-to-face events again, right? Some people might not want to go, and that's the opportunity to
Yeah.
go out there and to establish new connections, etc. So, but this is the importance. If there are things that you're not comfortable doing, another key takeaway that I love from the book is get an accountability partner, right? Find somebody that can help challenge your thinking and be that support person that'll help push you in your comfort zone, outside of your comfort zone, sorry. So, because there are going to be times where you just will struggle to do that task or do something different. And again, we all need somebody to push us. And if we think about all the high performing athletes out there, like they've got multiple coaches. Yeah, they don't just have one coach. They've got coaches for different aspects. From mindset to they've got a physio, they've got a masseuse, defensive coach, forward coach, whatever it is. They've got a video analysis coach that's sitting there analyzing the game. So they've got multiple people that are helping them and holding them accountable, right? Why should we in sales be any different?
Yeah, I love that. And Tim Moses has a great comment here as well. If you're not showing up for yourself, others will eventually believe you can't show up for them either. So talking about having the right types of habits, talking about executing them consistently. Just love that quote. So let's talk about, because we're like, I think we're getting into a little bit of both skill sets and mindsets. And so let's talk about that. You were sharing, Luigi, about starting your day and how the beginning of your days are most productive for you. And something that James talks about in the book is that, like, we each have our unique skill set. So like, maybe my goal shouldn't be to be an astronaut because that's not within my wheelhouse, but like figuring out what my own wheelhouse is. And something that I realized, and this is speaking to the mindsets, something that I realized was that the beginning of the day and Mondays are not the right day for me to go hard in the paint. And granted, I don't work in corporate America anymore, so I have this freedom. I now hold Mondays for self-work.
Yeah.
And so like, one of the habits I have is that every single day, the very first thing I do is I take my phone that is next to my bed, but it's, it's off, it's silent. And I put on calm.calm and I do a meditation. So like, that is a habit. And then I stack it with doing, I do like standing crunches, I do standing crunches, and then I do a plank, and then I stack that with either listening to part of a podcast or listening to a Blinkist. And stacking is, there's actually an entire book called Streaking that's really incredible on this topic. But stacking is something that James Clear talks a lot about. And I think like the reason that I'm focusing on skill sets to start is that I think a common takeaway from Atomic Habits are more of those hard skill set things that we should do. Like even in the context of this conversation, make cold calls, add new prospects to your cadence. But creating those healthy mindset habits, equally important. So like now, if we're thinking about things that I'm doing consistently, every single Monday I show up and I do an extra long meditation. I journal for like 2 to 3 hours.
Wow.
To get everything out. But you know what's really interesting about that, Luigi, is that when I started journaling, I tried to do a daily journaling practice and it felt like a chore.
Yeah.
It wasn't productive. It wasn't right for me. It's what everybody online was saying the best habit is. It wasn't for me. So I pivoted that, and I still do like a nightly gratitude journal thing, but it's like 3 to 5 minutes. But I found that the habit that serves me best and where I can show up consistently is doing it once a week and doing it on Monday. And that is how I start my week, with a mindset of being very intentional and very strategic about how I'm going to spend the rest of my time. And it also allows me then to be very present for the rest of the week, because I don't feel flustered or hectic. I start with just a really incredible sense of calm. Yeah. What are some of those mindset habits that set you up to successfully be able to deliver the skill set things later on?
Yeah, that's really good. And I think what I like about what you're sharing, right? This is where, when you see some gurus out there that say this is what you should do, the reason why I don't align with that is because we've all got to do things that work for us. Yeah. Everybody has different things happening in their life. Some have kids, some don't have kids, pets, whatever it might be. You've really got to come up with the structure that works for you, right? This is why, for me, how do I get my mindset into a position where I can develop the skill set? For me, training, like that physical aspect, I have to train. I train every day, not because I'm worried about weight, or I actually train every day because I love the feeling I get from it mentally. Yeah.
Yeah.
It allows me, I habit stack as well. Like you talk about, I train, I listen to a book or a podcast. I love doing both. Often I get stopped and I'm sitting there taking notes, and it's the worst when you're running, by the way, because when you're running and you're trying to then take notes on the Audible clip or on your notes phone, right? You're trying to type.
Trying to do an audio message like
then you look back at your notes and you can't understand any of it because it's all mistakes. But for me, that's an important part, because it allows me, if there's something that I'm stressed about, it'll de-stress me, right? I can think a bit clearly. I've ticked the box. I've accomplished something, especially because maybe not everybody but there are moments where I have a little bit of anxiety about something that might be on my mind. And that gives me time to have that space when I train.
Yeah.
Then it allows me to get into that zone of, okay, now that I can focus on the skill, the learning, right? So this is why, for me, what's worked for me for many years is the key part of getting my mindset right is training in the morning, because it just ticks a box. Yeah. And it doesn't matter when, like whether it's, some people like to train really early, some people like to train late, whatever works for the individual. But how has it helped me is ticking that box in the morning gets my mindset open, and then I'm ready to tackle certain things, and especially if I want to develop that skill. And that's why, again, I like habit stacking, training, and listening, because it means I'm achieving something, right? I'm also learning something, and then it gets me into that growth mindset as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I think but it's so important, because it can be easy, if you are online at all, to think that there is a right way to do habits like this. Like you have to work out 7 days a week, or you have to I think what the point that both you and I are trying to make is that consistency is king or queen.
Yeah.
And next to that, you need to figure out what works for you, but do that in the context of, the quote that I had up about, I'm going to put it back up here for a second. The quote that I had up about, if it's too easy,
Yeah.
are you pushing yourself hard enough? Like, are
Yeah.
you, something I say quite often is that we should sort of gently be always pushing against our boundaries in that pursuit of continuous improvement. So I'd love to jump into now some of those specific skill sets, because there's so much good stuff in the book. And one more slide, I'm going to just pop up really quick, Luigi, because when we did this book for Business Book Club last year, one of the pieces of feedback that I got from folks was sort of a sense of overwhelm and not knowing where to start, because the book is so meaty. There's so much good stuff. And you already gave one exceptional tip, which is like, just do the small thing.
Yeah.
And whether that's creating systems and focusing on the daily work, or whether that is, putting on your running shoes or putting on the Soul Cycle shoes, like that first small little micro movement. But the most important thing you can do is simply take action. Like any action, take action. So I came up with a small list of some of my favorite things. And I know some of these are your favorites as well.
Yep.
And you have some additional things. But I'd love to start with time blocking, just, very self-serving. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. What button did I press now? Where are our faces? Here we are. I am so obsessed with time blocking, and there are so many iterations of time blocking that when people say time blocking doesn't work for me, or they let their self-diagnosed ADHD become an excuse for not creating habits and not creating routines, it just irks me, because time blocking can be something like the Pomodoro effect or effect. I don't know what show I was just on. But the concept of taking 25 minutes on a very focused, specific task, 5 minutes on, 25 off, 25 on, 5 minutes off. For me, I do much longer chunks of work, because when I get into the flow state, I can really stay there. But time blocking is also what we've both just described as part of our stacking routine. Like, we have time blocked time in the morning for a set of mindset-based habits. And we've held and protected that time. We've prioritized that time. And that kind of speaks again to Tim's quote about showing up. If you don't show up for yourself, and if you don't tell others how to respect your time, or tell others what is important to you, how would they know? Or if you don't respect your own time, why would you expect them to? How do you approach clustering or batching or time blocking, or whatever, phrase you use to describe it?
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of time blocking, right? And again, going back to what Tim said, in the book, he talks about the mastering the art of just showing up, right? You've just got to show up. That's that consistency, yeah. But I think from time blocking perspective, this is the difference between having a reactive mindset and a proactive mindset, right? And if I think back, and sometimes, and look, I'm far from perfect. There are things that I do really well, but there are the opportunity for growth for me is still massive. That's what I love about this, right? I'm 41 years old. I've still got so much opportunity for growth. But whenever I'm super stressed is when I'm in the circle of reactiveness. Yeah. It's when I'm not time blocking. It's when and then I start to feel guilty, because there's certain things that I know I need to do that moves the needle in the right direction that don't get done. And that's because I'm in that complete reactive state. The moments where I feel so in control, where I'm feeling so good about things, where I'm feeling so efficient across other areas of my life too, right? Not just work, but at home, etc., is when I'm really diligent with the way that I'm managing my time, right? So that for me is the time blocking element. I believe for any salesperson to be super successful, that's a key to success. Right? Being very diligent in blocking those key things. And like I said, there's always going to be an aspect of the role that's reactive, but there are things that if we don't block to do and they don't get done consistently, we will see that inconsistent performance, right? We don't see that consistency of performance. And that's something that, that for me, I know when I'm starting to stress, and I know, what are those triggers? And one of them is I'm looking at my calendar, and there are things in my calendar that I'm just not time blocking for.
That's powerful. That concept of we want to have a habit of being proactive in the way that we are managing our time.
Mm.
But when we slip out of those habits of proactivity and into habits of reactivity, you can feel the ripple
Mm.
effects through your professional and your personal life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's the downside. There's, the upside and downside of this stuff, right? And again, it's something that he talks about in the book. But there are downside there. So this is why, for me, I think if I look back to the moments where I've hit some incredible numbers, it's when I looked at my calendar, and there was, I was really time blocking really well. If I look at it at the moment, it's probably not where it needs to be. So I need to readjust and recalibrate and take back control. But this is why, that whole concept of, if we're always striving to be better, it's okay to be in a position where things aren't perfect, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not perfect. Yeah. But as long as we're striving to improve and we are aware of the gaps, then we can take action and get an
Mm.
accountability partner to help.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there is something to progress over perfection.
Yeah.
But, perfection is a very unrealistic, an unrealistic expectation, like to this quote that
Yeah.
James Clear has in the book, like, the best is the enemy of good. Sometimes we just need to remind ourselves that, we're doing our level best. Like calendar management is something that I'm really good at.
Yeah.
And so it's also very noticeable to me when I slip up, when I slip out of those good habits. My calendar is aggressively color coded.
Yeah.
Everything is time blocked. I am ferocious about protecting my time blocks, and I am very conscious. I align them to my key result area, my KRA, and that's something that I do usually once a quarter, but at least once a half, like bringing my calendar back to make sure that the activities, the colors that the activities represent, align to my KRA. And I also, anything that's on my to-do list gets scheduled into my calendar. I wish I could share screen right now because I just got back from being out of office for a week. And so I have a lot of to-dos that I'm catching up on. And so my entire calendar right now is little things like review Ryan's sequences, write post for Mixmax, like edit this. And they're all just these little time blocks of
Yeah.
things that are maybe only going to take 15 or 20 minutes. But if I don't put that 15 or 20 minutes on my calendar, when do I think they're going to get done?
Yeah. And the other thing I like about the way you set up your system is you've got auto replies set up on both email and LinkedIn. And that's
Such
something that
aggressive auto replies.
man, I'm very bad at that, right? So, I got to get better at that. But I love the way that you set that up because, and Jen Allen is another one that I love the way that she sets it up as well. She's got the same sort of system set up because then it manages the person sending the message. It manages their expectations to go, while they're away, I probably shouldn't expect an immediate response. So then it can, reduce that tension from your end going, I've got to respond to all these people. No, because I've explained that I'm away, or it's going to be a delayed response. So I actually really like that. And these are the things when we talk about, in the book, we talks about creating that system, right? And I wrote the goal, create the system. These are the things that I think are important. We all have strengths and weaknesses, and yes, it's important to leverage our strengths, but it's also important to identify those weaknesses that can prevent us from, getting that system in place. When we define some of those gaps, then we need to take action, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So right. And I'd love to hear from folks that are online right now as well, in terms of what's working for you, or maybe what you've tried that didn't quite have fit for purpose in your life. So please drop a comment and share with other folks on the live, share with Luigi and I what habits you have that really serve you, or what you've taken out of the book that maybe we haven't talked about yet. One of the things that I think is kind of related to time blocking, that's the second bullet point on this list, is stacking.
Yeah.
And I know we talked about stacking a little bit in terms of, or I gave the example of how I stack my mornings, the meditation, little movement of the body, the Blinkist, etc. Let's talk about it in terms of sales habits.
Yeah.
I'll give an example of one of my favorite ways to combine time blocking and stacking, actually, and then I'd love to hear your take. But when I was on the phone, which was for a huge part of my career, I've made over 100,000 cold calls. I would time block cold calls and then time block admin after.
Yeah.
So what that would look like is maybe 30 minutes that is blocked to prep. And that's where I'm putting my list together and figuring out what the, call opener and impact statement is for that one specific segment of my list that I'm going to call. Then I'm going to go to the phones and I have my list and my call opener, and it's the same thing. So I can just burn through calls, but with that relevant reason for the call, with an impact statement that has value for that particular segment. And then I save all of my follow-up to send after that 1 hour, power hour call, whatever whatever lingo maybe is used inside of your organization. But organizing that maybe 2 or 2.5 hour block of my day in a way that was so clear that it was prep for calls, only calls. Yeah. Somebody's definitely going to ask me to send them that calendar invite, send them follow-up information, whatever it is. Let me tell you, folks, they don't care if it comes 30 minutes later. We're not that important to them. So just holding that admin bit back for that next time block so that I can stay in the flow state on phone calls allows me to stack. It allows me to time block. It allows me to create that habit.
Yeah.
And it increased my productivity tremendously. So that is something for folks that are on the phone, or maybe you take inspo from that, even if you're not on the phone. That's something I'd really recommend testing in your own life.
Yeah, I've used a very, very similar structure, right? Whenever I'm in the zone of calling, I don't want to break that momentum by stopping, because that just kills, momentum is what will drive success, especially because you've got that positive energy happening, right?
Yes.
And then all of a sudden you're getting a roll. It's just like the flip side. When you're making calls and you start to get negative in your mindset, another voicemail, another no, you actually start manifesting the opposite, the negative side of selling, right? So I'm a big believer in clustering. So doing the call block, taking your notes, then doing the follow-up tasks, right, of what you need to do, and then going, right, planning my next block at the end of that. So that's a really simple habit stack, right?
Yeah. And gosh, the best time to make another phone call is right after somebody said yes. And instead, we put down the phone, we open up our email, and you're on this, emotional high from having just, accomplished that best case outcome. So get the heck back on the phone. Related to that is this next bullet point I have up here around resisting or removing temptation.
Yeah.
And, I know we talked about it a little bit James Clear talks about it in terms of replacing water with soda or removing snacks from your house. I talk about it in terms of simply removing the temptation to check my work stuff by putting it on another phone that I take out of my possession at the end of the day. When we think about it in terms of sales habits, what are some of the temptations that we can remove that help us sell better or show up better for our customers?
Yeah, a couple of basic things that I've tried and I've implemented. I've switch off notifications. I think that's super important. Switch off notifications on your laptop, especially the email pop-up, right? There's nothing worse than you're doing something, it pops up, you look at it. I've actually started using the do not disturb feature, right, on both my phone and my laptop.
Yeah.
I'd use this thing where I'd flip my phone upside down, but then I would actually get curious to go, what's actually under there? So, and look, for a long time, I've had notifications completely off. But then my kids would complain, hey, I'm calling you, texting you, don't respond. So I'm like, okay, cool. But Use the do not disturb function. I think for me, that's really, really, really important. I've also used apps where it would prevent me from accessing social media apps, because that's a big distractor. Like, just, you pick it up. That's that habit. You pick it up, you start scrolling, you start looking, and then you can start comparing what's happening in their world and your world, and you're like, all of a sudden, the task that you're trying to focus on, you've completely diverted your attention, and you're focusing on something completely different. So,
Yeah.
you know, turning off those apps is especially when I'm in a time block, like when I'm in a phone block. Like, I am very, very disciplined when it comes to that. I'm somewhat undisciplined because I get distracted really easy in other areas. But when it comes to that calling motion, because it's something that I've done for many years, I'll limit distractions around that. Actually, that's one thing that I found very hard working from home when other people are here, because it distracts me when I'm trying to get into that zone, right? So there's some of the little things. Remove social media access. I think that's really, really important. Turn off notifications. LinkedIn's a place where you can engage and prospect, etc. But time block for that as well.
Yeah.
Right. That's another thing. I try to go on there in the morning, and I go on there at night. And during the day, I very rarely will go on there during the day. Okay. Because it can become a distraction if I'm not careful.
Yeah, brilliant. I think all brilliant. Just like I keep my work stuff on a phone that I leave in my office when I'm making calls. This is where my very addictive TikTok and Instagram and all of that is. And I put that out of the room. I mean, to be clear, I'm child free and like nobody needs me that bad. So it's maybe a little bit easier to do. But even in life in general, I keep my phone completely silent except for like 5 emergency override contacts. And those are the only people that it makes noise for. I also keep my computer completely silent. It never dings at me. None of my stuff goes off. But let me ask you this, Luigi. Because we're on the same page. Like, when I am doing focused work, my email is closed, my LinkedIn is closed, my Slack is closed. My LinkedIn, I time block it. And outside of the time block, if I'm checking and I respond to comments, I set a 10-minute timer, because otherwise I just...
So that's good.
Well, all of a sudden it's 30 minutes later and I'm like, oopsies. But let me ask you this, because that is advice that I give out a lot, that when you are calling or when you are prospecting, to eliminate those distractions. And the pushback I get is, well, I need to be able to respond immediately on Slack. Or like, what if my boss sends me an email? So how do you recommend that folks that have a boss like set those boundaries or set those expectations?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of thoughts to this, right? Because it's often, well, what if my boss needs me? But I'd rather ignore him while I'm prospecting versus having a conversation about why I didn't hit target, right? Because that's a very different conversation you're having. And I think I was one of the worst salespeople to manage, right? Because I would be very difficult to get on calls. I hated going into the office for meetings. Like, I was very much focused on revenue raising activities. Yeah. And as much as it frustrated my manager, he was always the one to ask me to close a few more deals at the end of the month to cover some of the gap. Right. So, but I think it's important to manage expectations now that I'm a bit more mature. I think it's okay to say, hey, these are the times that I'm time blocking for this particular activity, prospecting. I'm not going to be answering during this time, right? Unless it's life or death situation. Yeah. And put yourself away on Slack, right? Whether it's Slack or Teams, whichever platform you're using, put yourself away. Mute notifications. I mean, there's a couple of people in my WhatsApp that we're messaging quite frequently. I'll have to mute the notification so that it doesn't, pop up, because WhatsApp's a key place where I'm messaging for work. Yeah. So I think just managing people's expectations internally to say, these are the times where I'm just simply not going to be able to respond to you.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, an hour or two is not going to be a disaster if you don't respond back. What if you're on annual leave? What if you're, out of you're on the road and there's no reception, for example, like it can wait. Yeah.
It can wait. I think the two points that you made that I think are really important to repeat. One, folks, we're not that important.
Yeah, like it can wait.
It can wait an hour. And I think some of that, or at least for me earlier in my career, I had like a really self-imposed sense of urgency. Like nobody else was telling me that it needed an immediate response. I felt internally that I had to be present and I had to have this immediate response. And then as I grew into leadership, and particularly like, there was a time where I had like a 50 variable head count, like 400 emails a day in my inbox. And it was this aha moment of realizing these are the people I'm prospecting to. This is how they feel.
Yeah.
Like 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, that just doesn't make a difference in the grand schema of their days.
Absolutely.
So I think just remembering that, like, we're not doing heart surgery, we're not that important. It can wait. Yeah. But if you do have a boss, it is important to not just disappear. And something that you said earlier that I think is absolutely worth carrying forward is utilize your out of office replies. You don't have to use your email away message only when you're on holiday. If you have a 2-hour like call sprint, set a away message, like set your email reply message then to say it'll be 2 hours until you reply, or set that on Slack or Teams or whatever you're using. So there are tools that can help you set those expectations and help you hold your own boundaries around time blocking or clustered activities as well.
And I think, I don't want to discredit our profession, right? Because I love selling. It's the thing I've been doing my whole life, my whole working life, right? Yep. But you are right. Like there is no life or death in what we do, unless you're selling some sort of utensil to a doctor that needs it for a surgery, right? But there's no life or death. And there are probably, you could really break, if you think about the habits that will drive success, it's actually really simple. Yeah. Like I said, you can break it down and going, if it's top of funnel, I need to do X amount of top of funnel. This is why thinking about your system, knowing what are the metrics that are going to drive, that I need to drive to achieve the number.
Yep.
And then breaking that down, how much time is it going to take me to do that, to prospect, to get those numbers? Great. I've got the first part, progression, nurturing, whatever it could be. Like you could literally break them into 3 to 4. It's a Pareto principle, right? 3 to 4 tasks that you need to spend the majority of your time on.
Yeah.
Once you define that, it's just about and this is another key takeaway from the book. You've got to get used to being like doing the bored, mundane tasks, because it's the same things that you do over and over will give you the result. It's actually really simple. Sales is a really simple process, right? I've got to prospect. I've got to do that every day. I've got to have conversations. I've got to build proposals. I've got to nurture and progress. Like it's a very simplistic process. And we've just got to get used to doing the same thing over and over and over again, right? And this for me, like when I look at selling, if we think about the habits that will deliver success, it's actually not that difficult. It's just what's difficult is we get distracted and there are things that we don't like to do. So we try to do other stuff, or we try to reinvent things that don't need to be reinvented, right? And that's what I love about the book. It talks about some basic principles that if we live by them, especially in selling, there is nothing stopping us from hitting President's Club every single year.
It's so true. The atomic sales habits are not searching for silver bullets. Atomic sales habits are often going back to basics, getting a mastery of those skills, and then showing up consistently and taking action against them.
Yeah. And if you look at what you've done in the past couple of years, you've posted consistently for what, 1,000 days?
Yeah, over 1,000 days.
Right? You've grown your audience, doubled your audience in the last couple of years. I remember when you first.
More than.
Right?
Just from showing up and hitting publish one time a day. And I make money from it too. People reach out to me and ask to pay me to have access to the community that I built at zero financial cost, time cost. Time, energy, create, right, whatever. But like literally something that anybody could do that has internet access. LinkedIn is free.
Yeah.
And you're taking the things out of your brain and you're putting them on paper. Like, it is so accessible. And this actually really goes well with this next bullet point. It's so accessible, but it does take that consistent action. And that's the thing that holds people back. It isn't that they can't afford it, or they like, I know there's some fear elements that hold people back, but really it's just like taking action. And I put 90-day sprints on here as one of my bullet points, because that is like truly the method to my madness of so many things. And James Clear talks about this a little bit in the book, that it's actually not super healthy to set those really, really big moonshot goals, because we're setting ourselves up for failure. I love to do a 90-day sprint. That is how I started creating on LinkedIn. I did a 90-day sprint of, I made a list of, it was like 28 creators that I really respected. And once a week for 3 months, I went and I left meaningful comments on their content to like build up the courage to start posting myself consistently. And then I started posting every day. And my commitment was just to do it for 90 days to start. And now I'm, over 1,000+ days later. I did the same thing on TikTok. I posted at least 2 videos a day, every single day on TikTok for 90 days. And it was a platform that folks still, like really big voices from LinkedIn and Instagram, cannot grow on. And it's because there's a lot of rigor that are required, that's required to be successful. But what I found was not like, I'm going to have 30,000 plus followers. That's not my goal. My goal isn't to post for 1,000 days. My goal was to show up and really do it right, to execute at the highest degree for that 90 days. And then after that, decide where to go. And honestly, there's other stuff that I've tried that I did it for 90 days and was like, oh, not for me. But I didn't quit with any regrets. Like, I quit with this incredibly high degree of confidence that I showed up, I committed wholly for that 90 days. And it just was not like, I wasn't having fun with it, or the results for me just weren't worth the effort. And then I could walk away and refocus my time on the habits that serve me, that serve my key result area.
Yeah, and you gave it an appropriate amount of time to actually say whether it's something I want to continue or I don't. Like I've heard this before. Oh, I prospected for a couple of weeks, doesn't work. Cold call doesn't work. Like it's not enough time to actually come up with that assessment. It's like with anything, yeah. And I love, that's why I love the fitness analogies to selling. Like, you wouldn't go to the gym 2 or 3 times and then say, well, I haven't achieved my goal, or I haven't achieved the result, right? Because you haven't given it enough time. You've got to actually give it the right level of time to expect a result. Yeah. So I say the same thing with what we're doing in selling. In order to achieve that result, we've just got to be consistent for a period of time. And then if we haven't achieved the result that we want, then at least we can review and say, well, what could I maybe do differently? Did I maybe skip this? Did I do this? Maybe the messaging wasn't right. Maybe I'm just leveraging too much email and I haven't done any phone, or vice versa, right? We can at least look back and find, how do we tweak it, etc. But regardless, there will be some form of progress. And this is like, if you think back to what Kobe Bryant constantly says, he's not, it's not winning or losing. For him, it's learning. Yeah, he always, that's one of the things that I took away from some of the interviews that I watched. I think one, they said, are you the guy that hates losing or loves to win? He says, I'm neither, right? I love to learn. And I think that's the other key aspect of this whole process, is that when you start to get that operating system in place and you start to get those habits in, and if you haven't achieved the result that you want, you haven't failed. You've got a learning, and you can learn from the process, right? And if you learn, you grow. Yeah. So that means you've progressed, and that's a perspective.
I love that. That's it. We're going to end on that thought, because it was just, it was so powerful. It was so good. I feel like you nailed it. Little bit of a summary here. Like habits really do, good habits have the potential to fundamentally change your life in a good or bad way. And I think that is like, that's something that we underestimate, that those bad habits can ruin our lives, but it's often they're habits that we're in control of, and we keep showing up and making the wrong choices. And a call to action for everybody that joined us today, or maybe is listening to this on demand later, is to just change one habit. Habit. Maybe it's putting your phone outside of your room. Maybe it's getting a second phone. Maybe it's, committing just to lace up your shoes, or put on your SoulCycle shoes. One itty bitty little habit. Make a better choice tomorrow. And I think really related to that, a huge takeaway for me from the book was that goals are actually kind of meaningless, which is just such an unpopular opinion, because people are like, but I'm a dreamer. But if you do not have the systems and the processes in place to achieve your goals, it's wishful thinking, and it's utterly meaningless. Final takeaways from you, Luigi.
I think the big takeaway was getting comfortable with boredom, right? Getting comfortable, especially in selling, right? I think that's a key one, right? We just got to get comfortable in knowing that the basic things that we do every day is what's going to give us the result that we're looking to achieve. Yeah. And there's no shortcut. So you can't just cut corners when it comes to this. You cut corners and you want to take shortcuts, it's going to impact you in the long term. And sometimes the tasks that you don't want to do, that's when you need to do it. Again, it's been a big takeaway for me. It's like, there are days that you get up and you're like, I don't want to make calls. I don't want to send an email. I don't want to jump on LinkedIn, blah, blah, blah. But that's when you got to do it. And if you find an accountability buddy, even better. And if you haven't got somebody, go and reach out to somebody and say, hey, I've got this 90-day sprint. Leslie said I've got to do this 90-day sprint. This is what I need to do. Can you be my accountability buddy? Right? And help push me outside of my comfort zone.
I love that. Great calls to action. Find an accountability buddy. Create some rigor around your goals so you can actually achieve them. We have some other exciting stuff coming up for Business Book Club. We're going to do another one of these Business Book Club in practice sessions, October 10th. Maura Asseline's going to join me, and we will be doing the Challenger Customer in the lens of Q4 disco questions, which I think is just going to be fire. We do meet once a month, but it's a private Patreon community. So if folks want to learn about joining that, check us out at patreon.com/businessbookclub. Upcoming books for that are Seth Godin's new book, Song of Significance, which I think is going to be, I haven't read it yet, quite good. Angela Duckworth's book, Grit, which people rave about. So I'm super excited. And then I'm missing one that I probably should have already started reading. But anyways, the discussions are incredible. So patreon.com/businessbookclub if you want to learn more. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Luigi, you are just an absolute treat to collaborate with. So thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for putting this on. Thanks for what you do for our community. And I look forward to seeing people in Leslie's Patreon, because that's where I am as well. So.
Yes, Luigi's a member, so now you know it's part of the Cool Kids Club. All right. Thanks, everybody.